All right, well, we can get into it. You ready to talk about 12? Welcome to the Plan Podcast. This podcast has quickly become the #1 podcast focused on emerging industrial thin client technology and manufacturing visualization. My name is Brian. The Plan is brought to you by ThinManager Software, the global leader in thin client management and industrial mobility solutions. ThinManager is a Rockwell automation technology. We've taken a little time off from the Plan. Time to end our fiscal year, get past automation fair, and time to focus on a couple of other projects that need to get wrapped up. But we're back, our third year of podcast, our season 3, if you will, and we're ready to get the shows going again. 2020, it's almost over, and it's been a year like no other. Before we close the door on this crazy year, we just released ThinManager version 12. We're very excited about this, and the entire ThinManager team is pumped to get talking about this. So today, like with other major releases, I'm joined by Nick Putman, the global product manager for ThinManager. Nick is the man when it comes to what's happening with ThinManager. Nick's ready to answer my questions about version 12 and why all of us should be excited for this next major version of ThinManager. Well, Nick, welcome back. You're no stranger now. You've been on the show several times. Thanks as always for agreeing to come on and letting us just talk to you a little bit about ThinManager.
You bet, Brian. Happy holidays to you and your family.
Yeah, this is the last one of the year. We've actually taken a little bit of a break with everything going on, automation fair at home and all that. We actually haven't done a podcast in a couple months, but we're trying to get one more out for the end of the year. And of course, this one is all about ThinManager version 12, which I think everybody's excited about.
Yeah, I am as well, and happy to be here and talking about it. So.
Happy to get it out. I'm sure it's been
absolutely.
I mean, maybe not a long time coming, but it's been in the works for a little while.
It has, absolutely.
So, I guess we can just kind of dive into it. One of the features that we've been talking about for a while and everybody's kind of, buzzing about, if you will, is one of the biggest new features for ThinManager version 12 is the web browser display client. And so to get started, I was hoping you could just tell us a little bit about what the display client is and what makes it so exciting.
Absolutely. So I think the web browser display client, which kind of originally started as we need to deliver a native web browser with ThinManager in the firmware to allow our customers to deliver those web-based applications. And it really kind of evolved from there, right? We took a step back, we sat down with the engineering team, and they provided a ton of really good insight as to maybe where the industry may be headed and what we could do a little bit differently. So what this really evolved to was into ThinManager implementing the Docker technology, which allows us now to containerize that web browser application. So we're going to take that web browser and we're going to be able to deliver that content that you would typically use, a standard remote desktop server. You would install the remote desktop services role, publish your web browser application, then deliver a session of that using a Windows account to the Thin client. In today's architecture, we can just simply deliver that web-based application that's now containerized and managed by ThinManager directly to that Thin client. So I don't have all of the additional overhead that I have to manage in that system. So it's really exciting from the ability to simplify our deployment and deliver those web-based applications that are becoming more and more commonplace in our industrial space today, Brian.
Yeah, that's exactly. Immediately what I was thinking is just the reduction in authentication, that RDP session, just the simplicity, if you will, that's going to be, I think, make things faster and easier. Honestly,
absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Well, and I think adding, the container server, the Docker container server, and just containers in general for use in ThinManager could be really significant for the platform. And I know it's been talked about, leading up to this point. Tell us a little bit about how that may play out moving forward with ThinManager.
Absolutely. So the current implementation of the web browser display client, as we're calling it, or Docker container within ThinManager, relies on the container application to be hosted on a Windows server. So when we host that application on a Windows server, we're still using the resources of the server to deliver and provide that web-based application visualization to the Thin client. However, I don't need a Windows user. I don't have to have a dedicated Windows profile. Windows Remote Desktop Service is installed. Again, a lot of that management goes away. But the Docker technology that we've implemented under the hood really provides us the framework to start doing something really unique. And what that's going to be is going to be able to distribute where do I want that container to run. So again, in the release that's available today, that container needs to run on a Windows server. In pretty short order, we're going to use one of our modules within ThinManager that can be applied to our terminal profile or to our Thin client, if you'd like to think of it that way. When we apply that module, we're going to then be able to decide, maybe I want that container to run on a Linux server. Maybe I want that container to run on the Thin client itself, right? I may have hundreds or if not more of these Thin clients or end nodes, we can think of them as, in my infrastructure already, right? And each one of those has some available resources. Again, typically we're not including any local storage on those devices because we've never needed it. But there is compute and there is RAM, right? There's processing power on those devices, and we can really start to take advantage of the processing power that we've already got, right? I don't have to go out and buy anything new. I've got Thin clients already, but I'm just not using their full capabilities, right? So let's start taking advantage of the compute on those devices and push that container itself to run on the Thin client. So we're really distributing where our resources are within the facility, but still maintaining that centralized management component that ThinManager was really founded on, right? So it's really exciting for what we're going to be able to do architecturally. Our ability to scale and deliver content with various different distributed compute models is going to be really, really exciting in the pretty near future.
Yeah, that is actually really exciting. Now, from the hardware standpoint, have we seen any cutoff from the hardware that can be used, or does it seem? I mean, I guess from a resource standpoint, as we're pushing these containers, how does that affect running ThinManager from a hardware standpoint?
Absolutely. So again, I think it's becoming obvious that on the server side, I may not be required to have as much or as many resources available. But when I start thinking about my Thin client hardware, right, what am I actually going to use? I can use some of the pieces of hardware in our Rockwell portfolio as an example. If I look at the VersaView 6200, in a typical deployment today, let's say I was running one or two applications in a tiled mode, I'm likely using less than 5 or even less than 2% of the actual resources available on that Thin client. Right, unless I've got a very large number of graphically intensive applications, I'm tiling, multiple applications on there, lots of VNC connections. It's very unlikely that I'm taxing my Thin clients very heavy today. So when I start to think about pushing containers there, I should be able to push, multiple or at least a good number of containers to that Thin client that I've already got. If I knew that this Thin client that I'm speccing in a future deployment of ThinManager using our web browser container and beyond, maybe I would start to consider looking a little bit more closely at the CPU and the RAM available on that Thin client. One of the other really exciting things that we'll be able to do architecturally is actually have a dedicated Thin or Zero client act as a container server. So imagine that we push the firmware to a Thin client, such as we do today, but then we specify that Thin client is now going to become a container server. So I could go out and spec out a little bit heavier, more computationally powerful Thin clients that are going to act as container servers. And then I could still have a couple really, really small footprint Thin clients that I have across the architecture that would be able to get containers running on other Thin clients, right? So you could really start to see how you can totally distribute that load, and really, it does absolutely play into your hardware considerations.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I mean, because you could even do multiple,
Absolutely.
you know, container servers or the Docker servers and make those thin clients that way and be able to leverage some of your smaller clients, those single display clients and things like that, to just kind of be that pass through to serve it up and do it quickly and efficiently.
That's right. So we're now talking about having content on a thin client that's being hosted on a different thin client. And all of those different devices we just talked about don't need a Windows operating system that has to be managed by our teams, right? So we're really introducing something pretty special here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the kind of the possibilities are limitless.
They are. That's right. So, when we get the question, do you have an architecture? I do have one, but there's many, right? So we're no longer saying that it's a one size fits all approach. We're going to be really, really scalable and flexible with this deployment.
Have any of the integrators doing? I mean, obviously this has been out for only a couple of days, so I don't know if there's really anybody who's done any real deployments yet. But have we gotten any questions out of the ordinary from any of our integrators and partners when trying to implement it?
So I wouldn't say out of the ordinary, but I'd say one of the most common questions and the most logical place that people go from this is they say, well, that's great. You have a Docker container technology and you've got web-based applications, but what about my other applications? Can I containerize those? Well, so the answer today is that, for today it is web-based only, but in, again, very short order, the next few months, we're going to be releasing additional container images. So those container images will be capable of hosting other types of applications, not just web-based applications. You won't have to do a software install to take advantage of a new container image. Just like our firmware today, you'll be able to bring just that package into your platform. And in the future, we plan to even allow you to customize your own containers, build your own custom applications that will be containerized and, again, can be distributed across your architecture. Just as a kind of a heads up, Brian, I think some of the ones that we've got planned, kind of the standard build ones, not the custom, but the standard build containers that we plan to release right now would include the Citrix browser, right? So that you can natively use the Citrix applications, browse to storefront, and really eliminate some of the incompatibilities that we had previously with things like virtual screen and tiling when running our Citrix content.
Yeah.
It'll also kind of decouple, the different version specifics between ThinManager and Citrix, because we'll be delivering it natively, right? So if you think about how you would connect to a normal Citrix application today from your desktop, it'll be the identical experience. You won't have anything different when you're using ThinManager. PDFs, different versions or flavors of web browsers, right? So maybe we want to have Chrome, Firefox, you name it. We also want to have one for PDFs for static images, so PDFs, or JPEG images, MPEG, things like that, right?
Yeah.
All of those things are pretty standard file formats. So those are the types of applications or container images that we'll provide. But again, we'll continue to give some guidance on how you can customize those for your own applications, and really at that point, it becomes kind of endless what your opportunity is.
Yeah, all that without that Windows session,
right?
Which
absolutely,
yeah, that's really cool. Well, okay, so obviously, this web browser display client is the beginning of a lot, and it makes sense that it's kind of the feature or the premier feature of ThinManager version 12. But moving on, what else is in version 12 that's notable? I know we've done a lot with user experience in general. We're always working on the wizards and just kind of loading as much in. What about like additional security features that we're rolling into version 12?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, we did a ton of work kind of under the hood with our security, changing encryption mechanisms and things like that in the previous version 11. What we kind of focused on here was how do we tie out from the end user, the administrator of the system, and security? How do those three play together, right? And how do we enhance the experience for providing that granular approach to managing the security and the secure access of the applications within ThinManager? So we've now allowed things like the registration of a badge to happen at a terminal. So you no longer have to go to your administrative account holder, have them enroll yourself as a badge tied to your own username, right? That's something that we can do at the Thin client. we've allowed some inherited permissions. So as you add different layers of users in the tree, you'll be able to implement different layers of access. We've added PIN authentication for locations as well as different devices. Previously, that was limited to a few specific user interactions. So there's a lot of things that we've done along those lines. We've added search bars for the search bars for the display clients as you're going through doing your configuration. We've logged additional administrative changes specifically around the Pixie server and any administrative changes made there, making sure that those get logged for some of our critical industries, right? So done things where we're exposing additional events and methods through our ActiveX. Some of those ActiveX events and methods now are actually going to be native inside of USE. So as where previously you would have had to bring in the ActiveX object into your project in FactoryTalk USE, you'll now be able to just actually select those natively right within the product. So kind of, again, continued integration with the idea of providing more granular control for our administrators while trying to continue to secure the environment overall.
That's cool. Yeah, I think the ultimate goal is, as you move forward, just to have, instead of somebody, thinking, why isn't that feature there? Just, it is there. And increasing that user experience. And I've seen that through 10, 11, now through 12, that it just seems to get a little more and more intuitive, if you will, when you expect something to be there and
that's
have
right.
it be there.
Absolutely.
I think that's really cool. So the last thing, before I let you go, that I wanted to talk about is mobility, is the device, the mobile devices, and kind of how they work with ThinManager. And you mentioned the dependent pin, and I thought that was a cool feature for added security to say, okay, you need this additional pin to use one of these devices, whether it's before authentication or along with it to the user or anything like that. What are some of the other releases as far as what we're doing with some of the mobile apps or augmented reality notifications, all that kind of stuff that goes along with adding smart mobility to ThinManager?
Yep, absolutely. Good question. What we've done with mobility for this release has really been primarily focused around trying to create a uniform experience for our operators. As you know, Brian, we've got applications for Android, for iOS devices, for Windows phones and tablets, and they didn't always have a common feature set. Virtual screens would be a great example. If I wanted to build a virtual screen and have a few different dashboards, KPIs pulled from different applications, and allow somebody to see that looks great on my firmware booted terminal, even WinTMC, but then I would move to one of my other applications and I'd have to re-engineer my solution because we didn't have a common experience. So we put a lot of effort into making sure that we've got a common feature set and a common experience across those mobile platforms to really make it simple for our customers to be able to switch hardware, not have to standardize on one particular platform versus the other, right? You could have a mix of those.
Yeah.
That also kind of allows some of our customers to take the bring your own device model, right? As long as you've got secure connectivity to the network and you're in some situations providing maybe read access only, you can kind of do the bring your own device model. And maybe not everybody has that same device, right? In certain brewing applications, we've seen that be real prevalent, as well as some others. So, the primary goal or deliverable, I guess, for our recent release was really standardizing those mobile platforms. We do continue to work with some of the different AR and wearable different devices. Some nice partnerships with Rockwell recently have brought some other devices to the table. So that is something that we're continuing to put some focus and some efforts on, and look for more on that to come, Brian.
Very cool. Yeah. Have we seen, as far as the wearables go, does it seem like it's picking up more? I know even looking back a few years ago, people loved to see VR and AR in use conceptually, but I didn't see a lot of customers that I was talking to, really putting them in place in production. And it was more, kind of looking to the future, if you will. Are you seeing more and more people start to actually implement some of that stuff?
I think we are. I think we're seeing a lot more traction in that space, and I think a lot of that has to do with the ability for people to actually implement the solution. As we've seen with ThinManager and a lot of the other products that provide platforms such as Emulate 3D that utilize the wearable devices, right? Without a platform that makes it, somewhat intuitive to be able to develop those virtual environments, the effort involved can look like a mountain. Right, and a lot of times those mountains seem too large to overcome for some of our customers. But as some of the solutions continue to grow, continue to evolve, and continue to be able to take what you've already got developed and engineered, and implement that, which again is one of the huge strengths of ThinManagers, are non-reliance of you to re-engineer your solution in order for it to be viable in a augmented reality type environment, is really driving a lot of those solutions to become usable. As far as some of the use cases go, we see people starting, on the the administrative side, on the maintenance side, using it for training opportunities. So we're starting to see that kind of use case be implemented at various different customers, and that's really the first kind of step, right, to be actually to get to the point where we're actually using that type of technology in a production system for our operators. So I definitely think that there's a lot of progress in that space.
Yeah, I've always thought that, especially with virtual reality, that a training and a simulation is it's made for it. Those have always, in my mind, been something that could go hand in hand really easily, and I think maybe more with the augmented reality for actual production. So it's not quite as immersive, but that's just my opinion.
No, yeah, you're spot on, and we've seen a lot more conversation, I would say, this year than any other year in the past, right? I think the reality of having somebody travel to go get trained became not so much commonplace this year, right? With everybody trying to stay safe, a lot of our shelter in place, initiatives, and throughout the pandemic, right? We've all learned how to adapt and how to continue to do our jobs in different ways, right? And
yeah,
the resilience of people is amazing, but we still need to look for some better solutions sometimes. And so where you may have said it was easier to put somebody on a plane and send them out for training, maybe this becomes the easier solution and the safer solution, and one that helps keep everybody moving forward but safe at the same time. So I think that's helped drive a lot of this type of conversation, and will continue to moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, now it's probably easier to box up a set of VR goggles and send that preloaded, ready to go with stuff than to fly somebody in nowadays.
Absolutely.
For sure. Well, the mobility stuff seems exciting, especially as you talk about getting that, uniform experience across devices. I know one of the features I guess have always loved with ThinManager is being able to assign content to a user, and as that user moves from device to device, to be able to give them, the same experience, the same content displayed in the same way, regardless of which device they pick up. I think that's ultimately the goal, and I'm glad we're moving that direction.
Yeah, glad to hear it.
So, well, really, honestly, that's all I have that I wanted to ask you. I did want to let our users know that we put on our YouTube channel really just a video, a run through of ThinManager version 12 with Nick. So you can see Nick on the video, just about 5 minutes long, just walking through some of the new features that we're talking about, as far as the new web browser display client, and custom hotkeys, and just all the different stuff that we've worked into there. Maybe not all of it, but kind of a quick run through of some of that. If you haven't seen it, definitely go to our YouTube channel. You could just search ThinManager on YouTube. Go check it out. It's a quick and very informative little video. Nick, thanks so much for coming on and joining us again, and just kind of sharing all the great work you do with ThinManager, and letting
Brian,
us just badger you.
Absolutely. As always, welcome. Happy to be here. Welcome to engage anytime you'd like. So we'll talk soon. And if I don't speak to you before, have a great holidays, and to you and your family.
Hey, same to you.
Thanks, Brian.
If you like this episode, please click the subscribe button and subscribe to The Plant for a monthly discussion on emerging automation technologies. For more information on ThinManager, please visit ThinManager.com from any of your devices. Another special thanks to Nick Putman for joining us today and talking a little bit about ThinManager version 12. I'm your host, Brian Harned, and we look forward to talking to you next time on The Plan.